Are we ready? I have 9 o'clock. All right, I'd like to call the Properties Committee meeting for October 1. Happy fall, everybody. Is everybody signed in? Okay. Since we are only really audio and not video, I'd like the committee members to introduce themselves so those listening in know who's here. Bob, you want to start?
My name is Bob Hartley.
Jerry Connor.
Barb Sloan?
Nancy Hunt.
Marshall Adams.
Chair Roberta Davidson.
Marley Kistler.
John Nicholas.
Russ Boston.
Carl Wilhelm.
Peter Finelli. Bill Schwinn.
Thank you. We have a quorum. All members present. All right. The next item on our agenda is approving the minutes from September 3rd. Do we have any corrections, additions? Otherwise, we'll accept them as written. Any comments? All right, our next order is new business. That we have policy C03, which is the Properties Committee. And there's a red line revision that was posted. Most of you should have copies for that. Okay. So the main change is that the title changes of some of the staff. So it says the Properties Committee shall meet with the Association Capital Improvement Projects Manager, Facilities Maintenance Manager, and/or others suggested by the General Manager to evaluate and make recommendations on association proposed new construction and major maintenance or renovations of the physical assets of the association. Do we have any other changes that need to be made to that section? Otherwise, yes, Jerry.
Thank you, Roberta. I'm not sure if it's in that section. I had a couple of comments on the overall policy, if I may. Thank you. I'll wait.
All right. So the next section 1.52 is on the committee shall evaluate and make recommendations on capital budget items related to properties as proposed by staff or the governing board. And it goes on to describes that this includes clubs, requests, beautification, architectural projects, etc. When we get to section 1.3, I see a conflict between 1.3, not a conflict, but a duplication of 1.53 and 1.54. That at the end of 1.53, talks about the committee chairperson will submit the findings to the general manager and the governing board by December 1 during the initial phase of the general manager's budget planning process. And then 1.54 sort of duplicates it. The committee chair shall make recommendations to the general manager and governing board for capital equipment and projects by December 1 of each year. So I find that as a duplicate. Any comments?
Roberta, if I may?
Go ahead.
Can perhaps Mr. Schwinn or Carl remind me of when clubs and others are supposed to submit to your team their requests for capital projects? I thought it was by December 1, and yet maybe it's just your deadline for the board is December 1.
That's it. Pete, do you want to chime in on that one?
Perhaps I'm reading it too much, but I'm reading governing board by December 1. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because we're still assembling everything. I'm not sure in my 2-year cycle that we've read that, you guys, the governing board, is the next step on December 1. In fact, I don't know of anything that we've done in the past where we started that until we're well into the budget cycle.
Pete, if I may, I certainly know that's true, and there had been discussion last year at the board level that the timing was not realistic, and certainly what you just described is very much part of the concerns that you and your team and the board discussed. The other thing was, I thought everybody was supposed to get things to you by December 1, and if they don't get them to you, we can't have evaluated and give you our evaluation on everything by December 1. I think we need to take a step back and look at overall timing of the budget process, and perhaps, Roberta, as part of this, Pete and his team, or Bill and his team, can advise us on what they think it ought to be, and we can bring the policies, not just ours, but others. I thought I had, I'm sorry, I'll speak more closely. I can bring the overall budget timing process into line. As you know, the board already took actions to allow using the prior 12 months for purposes of determining APF expectations for the budget process, and this is part of a good step along the right way. So can we put on hold the whole issue of December 1, not your comment about the duplication, but the December 1, and ask Pete and your team to come up with a timeline for the board that's appropriate not only for this committee, but for all others?
I know we have to set it.
Pete, let me jump in here, if you don't mind. Jerry, you're absolutely right. We did have the timing issue last year when it came to budget. There has been some dialogue with President Kuchak as far as when we do assemble the budget and how that kind of lays out. And what we were looking to potentially move to administer is the timing on our APF funds on an annual basis. We have a fiscal year, basically July through June. And what we would really like to do is kind of assemble our capital budget based on available cash. And the available cash would allow us to then look at a funding cycle, not change the fiscal cycle, but look at a funding cycle of January through December. At that point, we'd have collected 12 months of APF fees, which is the bulk and body of our capital program. And though at that point, at the end of December, we would have a 12-month tally of where we're at as far as collecting APF funds. So I would recommend pushing that back to the end of December, maybe February 1st, which falls more in line with the assembling of our budget. And that would then leave the entire month of February, March, and April for several committee meetings and the timing thing to kind of flush things out in time to get the budget finalized and approved in May, June for a kickoff in July.
Bill, Carl, go ahead.
Go ahead, you first, Jerry.
I'm fully supportive of everything you said. What I'm looking for is guidance from you and your team to the various committees on how to revise the policies to reflect that, so it kind of brings everything into what, in fact, the practice needs to be. And this is just one instance of one committee's policies where it needs to be brought into sync. And there, I believe BNF had some as well, and there may be other committees like.
Correct.
Okay.
And all policies are currently being reviewed at the committee level, so that's a good
So
thing.
it's a good opportunity for you to have the input on how to revise that. Carl, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
And just let me explain the difference between 1.5.3 and 1.5.4. The 1.5.3 is about the walks that we will do with the Properties Committee, the properties tours and their recommendations. And then the 1.54 clarifies more of specific equipment and projects. So the definition between what list the Properties Committee and Russ and myself will come up with after doing a properties tour. Both, however, follow exactly what you were talking about on creating the right timeline.
Okay, thank you. Roberta, is this time to raise the other concerns that kind of tie in with all of this? Okay, thank you. First, probably the easy one. I sat in on I think it was a Properties Committee a little over a year ago, and they were evaluating a project, and one of the other directors muttered in my ear, they're the Properties Committee, they shouldn't be considering the finances, that's the B&F Committee's role. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I think we need to put on the table what role this committee has in connection with evaluation of worthiness of projects overall versus the fiscal impact that might entail, and are we expected to weigh in on that as well? And that's really a question for you, Roberta, and the committee, and maybe for the board, because I don't have an easy answer for that. I mean, I can see it both ways, so I put the issue on the table, please.
You want to repeat that, please?
Yes, is the role of this committee to evaluate the worthiness of projects as projects themselves, unrelated to the fiscal aspects, or incorporating the fiscal aspects? I suspect that's a board choice, and obviously with input from the committees, this one and B&F among others. And I had a second issue, if I may.
Well, let me just ask a question on this one. Probably Pete can answer this, or somebody else. Don't we have to sort of consider the financial impact before we would recommend it to the board?
Oh, certainly.
Because that would determine if something's like over $5,000, then that
Yeah, there's a
impacts
whole
the
lot,
capital
a
budget.
lot of spokes in this thing, so let's flesh each one out. I'm almost certain, Jerry, that all the committees, and maybe with the exception of Pavilion, is on every bit of the capital budget approval cycle, including properties, including charter clubs, B&F, how that mingles into timing sometimes created some hassles last year. We were constantly making sure that everything timed out, but it worked out. I'm a big advocate of what you're saying for you guys considering proposals as they're in either infancy or, being presented. And that's the last piece that I wanted to highlight. I suspect most of you are aware of this, of the CR 13 being amended in Chartered Clubs Committee. To me, that's going to answer a lot of the questions that percolate from financial, from want and need, and you guys would probably be a perfect forum for those to be a reviewer before they, start to get way down the road for consideration. I don't know if anybody around the table, especially, Carl and Russ, agree with that, but I would think that'd be your role to say if somebody is starting to percolate, whether they can finance it or not, plunking it down within the campus should probably be something that properties has a say in.
I'm fine either way, Roberta, but I don't think we talk about it. And I know there was some concern by at least one director, whispering in my ear in the middle of a committee meeting that he didn't think that was the role of this committee. And if it is, I think perhaps this policy, or maybe one of the other ones, might be a little more explicit about including fiscal aspects of it. And there's a related issue, Pete, that you were just kind of touching on, which is kind of my second issue that gets to all of this, which is if we review projects in piecemeal, we can't look at the overall impact and prioritize among projects. And what I think this committee ought to be thinking about is if we have, let's say, several large projects, the Boomer Building, for example, or an expansion of the a cafe to create a nice meeting place on campus, and if we have those, they all may be, in our view, I'm just assuming, very worthy, but we may want to prioritize and say, this one should come before that one. In our judgment, that's our recommendation to the board. But if we don't have an opportunity to look at the big picture as well as the individuals, and I appreciate our looking at them as they go along, we can't give that advice to the board. And so I don't know, I think we ought to be saying something like that here, and then as part of developing the timing for the overall budget, if you would consider our ability to do that, because I know B&F committee has that opportunity because they get the budget, and it's all together. But if we're reviewing as a properties committee only piecemeal, we can't give our advice to the board as to what we thought the priorities were, fiscal issues aside.
Fair?
And so, Roberta, I would suggest, I don't have language here, but I'm suggesting if you and the committee and staff think that's appropriate, that this be revised to reflect these issues.
About it, Carl?
I believe that whether myself or Russ bring a project to this committee, or we have a guest here, like a club leadership president giving a presentation for an idea, and all the steps have been met, that it's our responsibility to provide you a base price, like an idea of what a project like that might cost, but not the final details of costing is at that point for this particular committee. But I think in the past, we have provided that, if it's a large project, we've given a ballpark of what we feel that cost is. It's not that hard to determine. And, but I think that's pretty much where it should stop. And then as the B&F committee reviews the flip side of that conversation, especially when it's in the concept stage, is that they get a light level discussion that properties has reviewed the idea, the addition, the building, the improvement, and then they get the heavy workload of the prioritization of that entry level cost assessment. So I think it's just the two committees kind of handing off the same information, but one, the properties takes it from a properties view, and the budget and finance takes it from the, can we afford to do this, and when, prioritize.
I'm not sure that, I'm not sure it's our responsibility as our committee to do that. We're properties committee. We recommend that this maybe stage should be changed. Then that goes above our pay grade, This is a recommendation, but if the board or the B&F committee says we can't do that because it's too expensive, we've done our job.
I understand, Marshall, but I'm thinking of where there may be competing projects, for example, a building for the Boomers. And while it's already through the board, last year it would have been appropriate, the Meadow Club. Both of them were substantially expensive projects. And this committee might have chosen to say, of the two, we think X, one of those projects, gives more value to the community than Y project. Money aside, we just know that there may be limited resources, and this is our recommendation on the priorities of value to the community of one project versus another, which kind of gets back to my second point I made, which is looking at the global as well as the individual projects. I don't have any problem, Marshall, if this committee has limited or virtually no say in the actual dollars of it, because, the B&F committee may prioritize and say, well, we can take these small projects and one large, or we can do too large, and we're going to make the recommendation based on what property said of what were the better projects to do for the community and marry that with the fiscal ability to do it. So I don't have any problem if we're not getting terribly involved in the money. I just raised it as an issue because we don't say it either way. But I do think at some point we need to be able to take a step back and prioritize all of the projects and give a recommendation to BNF and ultimately the board as to what we view the more important projects are for the community, and then let them make decisions based on either our recommendation or fiscal realities. And we're not saying any of this, and I think those are important issues to at least be thinking about, and depending upon how we want to go, either redrafting or not redrafting this policy.
Barbara?
I think that 1.5.3 says exactly what we as a committee are supposed to be doing. Aside from any financial or fiscal responsibility, it specifically says what our job is supposed to be, to then hand that off to the next step, and then hand it off to the next step. Having currently being a club president and looking at a capital project, that's how it was explained to me that this works. It's a stepping process, and it has to go through each one of those steps. And so I would imagine that if the project that we were presenting came to the property committee, there wouldn't be much discussion as to whether or not the club can afford it or not. Does it structurally make sense? Is it going to create any kind of safety issues, or is it going to mitigate safety issues? And then it goes on to the next one. And, you know, and I sit back as a club president waiting for this to happen. And that's the process or the understanding. I think when you merge these together, we get out of our lane and we start doing the business of the BNF committee and trying to influence what the BNF committee is doing. And I don't think that's our role or our responsibility.
Nancy?
It seems like for the last couple of years that I've been on this committee, we have been really good to put forth those projects or capital expense projects with reasoning. You know, here's why the metal shop needed to have this, and here's why. So I think that we do prioritize in that way, because we've always been able to explain why this is far more important right now, you know, i.e. the metal club, than it may have been 5 years ago. And I kind of agree, I think, with Marshall that I think we're aware of the cost, because Carl and Russ do a great job. That'll run $80,000, you know. I mean, they're pretty good about throwing out numbers to us. But I think that it's only our job to explicitly say why we felt this needed to be on the list, and how structurally it changes, and what infrastructure it might, you know, might affect. And we're pretty good at that. It seems to me, when I see the final things that come out of properties, we're pretty good about our reasoning and why this needs to be there. And then, like Marshall said, we hand it off. And I agree with Barb. I think it's a step process. I think that we do a pretty good job of that.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I just think that it's our job to evaluate the proposal. And if the club thinks it's very important, then it's our job to look at that and say, well, your reasoning is very good. Move it. But I think that the finance part, how much it's going to cost us off is not our situation, I don't think. If we recommend a $9 million building, everybody in the world will think we're crazy, but we must have evaluated that we need it. It's not our job to find the money. I don't think.
Any other comments?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
John?
Okay. One thing I'd like to add to that is I agree that property shouldn't be involved in looking at it from a cost standpoint. But I think properties needs to know whether clubs are participating, whether they are, let's say, putting out 10% of the cost, 20% of the cost, $50,000 or whatever it happens to be, because then we have an idea of club participation. Are they into this thing, or are they just sitting back waiting for something to be given to them? And to me, I think that's a very important thing we have to consider.
Yeah, and I think that's a separate issue. I think that's part of it, of our evaluation, but overall, it's a different issue, I think.
Madam Chairman? Madam Chairman, if you'd be kind enough to allow me to read from our policy statements of FA 01 3.3. Upon receipt of the FR1, the general manager will initiate evaluation of the request through the capital project planning process. This process begins with the community need being justified, justification, feasibility, and the initial request, initial analysis of the project by staff and preliminary cost estimates. Developing this, it goes through all, that goes on there. After staff has completed this part of the process, they will present their findings and recommendations to chartered clubs as appropriate, properties and budget and finance for their review and recommendation to the governing board for initial authorization to approve funds or to retain an architect. Upon board authorization, the project proceeds through the planning process. I think that as a committee, that settles kind of the structure and where it goes and who has what responsibility. Thank you.
Roberta, if I may? I just wanted to
yeah.
address John's comment when it came to the CR15s, and that's, or is it 13?
13.
That Pete touched on earlier, and that is at the time the club submits, the process along that particular form is being changed and adapted as far as what club responsibilities are financially. So that will be presented in the packet as things move forward.
So Jerry, did you still want to add amendments to that policy? Remember, this is just the standing committee policy, just establishing the properties committee and what our responsibility is.
Right. As I said, I have no dog in this fight over whether we talk about money or don't talk about money. And apparently, it's going to be kind of a very loose way, as you folks have explained, but not a lot of detail. And I'm fine with that. The related issue, Roberta, was whether we have to look at projects overall and suggest a priority in terms of worthiness for the community based on what staff has come up with tonight. Or we're only going to look at projects in isolation. And at the moment, it appears to be written in isolation, and perhaps if we could get guidance from you and the rest of the committee on how they think we ought to go about that, along with, of course, staff's input on that issue.
George, do you feel the FA policies take what Jerry's concerned about?
I personally think that one of the things we have to remember, first off, it's the general manager's budget. General manager approves that and brings the capital budget request to each one of the committees. At that point, the committee goes through it with the fine-tooth comb and says, why are we doing this? How come we're doing that? Why we're not doing whatever. I think that 3.3 covers the whole process, whether it's a club or an individual or anybody who wants to do anything capital-wise. Staff, I'm going to lean on you on this one. Do you concur with that?
George, it's my opinion that what Jerry is presenting is sound, and to solve this, I believe it's the chairperson's drafting of the presentation to the general manager. So if the properties committee feels that 10 projects have been presented to them in this particular season, and they want to clearly give their opinion of ranking, I don't think that has any harm. I think it'll make clarification for the next committee in their review process. So I think it's just about drafting.
And I agree. I hear you loud and clear on that one. Like I said, just above all things, as a committee, each one of our standing committees, this one, whether it's this one, Budget and Finance, or Charter Clubs, when it comes to the budgeting process, it is the general manager's budget. He has to provide it, he has to provide each line item, he has to justify each one of the line items along with the CFO. So that is the great envelope that we have for making sure that neither one of the committees run askew and/or the association general manager runs askew. They all have to agree on it.
And Roberta, if I may, just to kind of hopefully maybe finalize this regarding Jerry, I mean, we want to be as transparent as we know how, obviously. And so there are a couple of governing board decisions that are made throughout the budget process where they specifically go through and prioritize projects over 50,000, less than 100,000. The general manager has spending authority up to 49,999. So if we were to ask Pete to give me a CIP budget of everything from $5,000 up to X million, we'd be going through a lot of minutia when it comes to various things from a scoreboard to flags to various things on golf courses that I'm not sure you want to meddle in, since the general manager has that decision up to 50 grand. So projects over $50,000 and anything over $100,000 can be absolutely confined into an easy spreadsheet for all to review, as well as all new items and various things that we're replacing. But the vast majority, Pete, how long is that list approximately? How many items?
Maybe 200.
And the vast majority of those, I would say, are various things in Russ's domain when it comes to amending some of the buildings that we have, whether it's air conditioning units, heaters, those types of things, pool pumps. In Russ's line of work, I think he gobbles up the vast majority of kind of capitalized projects, over $5,000. And then Carl is really the project guy, looking at things typically over 50 grand and up. So, but when it comes to budget review and all that, we can very easily provide a list in whole, so you're not just nitpicking a particular project. You can see where it fits in the entire mix. Absolutely.
Thank you, Bill, and let me assure you, I don't want to see everything under $50,000. Thank you for the offer, though.
But I think Jerry has a very good point there. I think it would be nice for us to have some sort of priority as to what we, think projects should fall into. In other words, I mean, we've taken a look at them as to what, not that anybody, but at least they have an idea. If they get there and say, okay, we only have a certain amount of money, it goes to another committee, that they can actually get there and say, well, the Properties Committee thought this was the priority, this was the next priority, this was the next one that they looked at, and so we've got to get there. So we'll take one, and we can't afford 1 and 2 and 3, so we'll do 3 and 4, 1, 3, and 4. So in other words, but I do think we should have a little bit of priority as to what we consider what we'd like to see.
And it's just a recommendation.
So maybe a rating schedule, like if we were to look at everything over 50,000 and we say critical items get a rating of a 1, nice to have is a 3, or we figure out just a general rating that we can assign to those projects over 50,000, then when it goes to the governing board, they would know, that this is critical and has to be done.
Roberta, good morning. And Sherry, I hear you, but what I think we have to separate on this is with properties, you are looking at new projects, improved projects, not what Russ falls under R&R, whether it's a replacement of a parking lot because it has reached its age or things like that. And I think that's the huge separation when it talks to priority. When you're talking priority of new projects, I think that's a reasonable idea.
Right.
But the other thing we want to be careful of is you have experts sitting right next to you in Russ and
Right.
Carl, and these guys and ladies who work underneath them know in intimate detail what needs to be done based on our reserve study and how we've pulled it at, what the age of it is, life expectancy. I know Pete has lived in life expectancy for the last couple of years, but this is what I don't want to see, like Barbara said, getting out of our lane, Marshall getting out of our lane. Our lane is to look at, as a properties committee, what's new here and how's it fit into the overall structure of it. Not are we having 13 air conditioners put in the social hall this year instead of 15? Thank you.
Nancy?
Last year, I brought this up again, and we've had a little bit of a discussion. I really need a master plan. I mean, I kind of need to have a piece of paper to say, where does this fall into the long-term look of the community, which I think is kind of what Jerry is saying. You know, we can do it year by year by year, but I need that 5-year plan in front of me sort of to say, well, look, in 4 years, we're planning to double the size of that park. Then why are we going to put this in? I mean, I think that it was hard for me last year without that at least a 5-year, and I don't really believe in master plans longer than that, but I think Jerry's right. We do need to look at it, but without me seeing that master plan and what the board has approved for the next 3 to 5 years, it's hard to fit us in that project if in 5 years they see we're going to change that building to some way. And I don't know if we have that. I don't.
Well, I think one of the issues is we're getting away that this is a policy statement saying what the standing committees of the governing board are and what, as properties, what we are or what our responsibility is. And I think we're sort of getting in the weeds here. That, you know, if we have something that we want to add to the policy, I would, any recommendations? Otherwise, we can push it off to the next meeting if you want to add more things. Otherwise, we can accept it as it is, blue lined.
I think what I get from here, the only thing that I think we should accept it the way it is, other than with the exception that the dates will probably change. Is that nerds? I mean, as far as the November, December 1, that nerds, I mean, it sounds like that we need to come up with some sort of a shift in the dates so that, you know, so that we can get all the information.
So we think you're misreading the dates that are up there. So that's the date that is due to us. We're still compiling. We're not ready to deliver it yet. So if we extend those, it just makes our job putting this packet together even harder.
Oh, okay.
The sooner we get it, the better it is.
All right.
And I also want to reiterate, I've been working with this committee for 20-plus years. I feel it's the best committee we have as far as getting things accomplished. So number one, I don't think there's anything needs to be changed, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's my philosophy. You guys do a great job. None of this stuff is new. Those of you that have been on this committee before know that every budget, we bring a complete list of everything, whether you want to hear it or not, and we go through it line item by line item. Priority-wise is your list that you're going to compile at the end of your tour. That's the one that you have a list, what's the most important, what's the least important. When Carl and I look at all this stuff with Pete and Bill, we're already in the dollars. Budget and Finance has already gotten a piece of this as well. Where are we at? What do we need to start getting creative? That's when we do the nice-to-haves, the must-haves, the safety, all that stuff. Every year we do this. So I don't think there's a whole need to change a lot.
I guess the question that I have on 5.4, it says that committee chairman shall make the recommendations by December 1 to the board. And
That's the part that's confusing. So, and really, that should be struck out, because that goes to the general manager, and then we present our budget to the board, if I'm correct. And George, correct me if I'm wrong.
And is there a particular timeline that needs to go to the general manager?
Stick with that.
December 1st date is appropriate for the general manager. The phase that ultimately the results of, after months of discussion of budgeting, Pete and Bill have a separate date that goes to the governing board, and I believe that's somewhere in the March, April area.
Well, should we strike on that 1.54 and just say to the general manager and eliminate and governing board?
And
Leave it
governing
at the
board.
December 1,
In both,
in both.
5.3 and 5.4.
Why can't we just eliminate 5.4 and cross out governing board in 5.3?
Because the difference in 5.4 is that if, let's just say over the next 2 months, we had clubs come in here wanting to present CR13s in front of this committee, that's the separation. The first paragraph, 5.3, is about the tours that you'll be performing over the next month, and 5.4 would be other business, other leaders, clubs coming in and actually providing property. If I have something that I know that should be in front of your attention that has nothing to do with your tours, that would fall under 5.4, and I would bring that to you before December 1st.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so just that we're clear, we are leaving 1.53 the way it is. And 1.54, we're taking out and governing board.
Both should take out and governing board.
Oh, there's a, okay. So, correct myself, 1.53 and 1.54, we're eliminating and the governing board, just leaving findings to the general manager. And then we're accepting the blue line for 1.51, where it puts the correct titles for the, who gets, we meet with, come up with our recommendations. Any
Madam
other
Chairman?
changes?
Madam Chairman, I respectfully disagree with Carl on removing the governing board of on the 5.3. And the only reason is that that is a list of what the committee has seen as problems that may be within our community. No recommendation, either or, and for informational purposes, I do not want any of directors, not only this year, but going forward, to be not knowing what's going on in our community. That's the only thing I would say. Thank you.
George, that seems reasonable. Thank you.
Yeah, it also does not say recommendations in 1.53, it just says findings.
Information.
Yeah. All right, so the motion,
To make it clear, we're eliminating the eliminate.
so we're going to accept the blue line on 1.51, 1.53, we're going to leave as is,
Yes.
okay? And 1.54, we're eliminating and governing board. And do we have a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, Barb Sloan seconds the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Our next part on the agenda is we're moving on to the facility policies. Before we get started on all of them, I gave you a copy of FA 12, and today's agenda only had 1 through 4. I would like to push FA 2 and 12 to next month. There's some developments, and we'll go over some of this when we get to the Don Baker Memorial section of the agenda. where I'm going to give an update, that we would review those two policies together since they're similar. And like I said, events are moving fast concerning them. So without objection, we'll move FA 02 and 12 to next month. So coming back to FA 01, this is our capital project planning process. I hope everybody has reviewed that. The main purpose of this policy is to formalize the capital project planning process for major repair, renovation, or new construction. And the only area I had a question on, and somebody who's been through this policy before, says under 2.0, criteria for using the capital project planning process requires member input. Who are the members? Is it the committee? Is it association members?
The entire association members.
Okay,
So this would be like the Johnson Pool is a good example. That fit that criteria where we got a design package together, presented it, I think, two separate times to the public for input and adjustments. Then we come back to the public again with those changes, so that way everybody's involved in the process.
I guess that needs to be clarified a little bit when we just say member.
Madam Chairman, owner members would be the proper title on that one, since they are the owner members, are the voting members of the community.
Thank you.
We just add owner, and we're good.
Owner member.
Yeah, that's what, it's already has member. We just put owner, member, input.
And the only other issue I had was on 3.6. It says board-approved projects will be included in the 5-year plan. What 5-year plan?
Don't get me started.
Bill can address this or George, I know, can address this better than I. I am aware that staff used to prepare a 5-year plan. I think, Bill, you had mentioned once to me that it did not appear to be as helpful as everybody would like, and that's why you would move towards a community master plan developed by outside experts. Unfortunately, as some here know, the experts did not perform as expected and had to be let go, and that Bill is now pursuing it differently. Bill, perhaps you could give the committee an update on the master plan.
The master plan, I can, and there's two things involved here. There is a 5-year plan, and it's a financial plan that we present annually. And so we do carry that out. Pete's got it, as far as the reserve study and our capital program, it goes out 30 years. But to sit around and worry about year 25 is relatively meaningless. So we kind of focus on our 5-year window. A couple of years ago, we kind of got away from that. We dropped it down to a 2-year scenario simply because we did not have a CFO on board at the time. I was relying on Mr. D'Angelo, who has 6,000 other things to do in his world. However, it was right in the middle of a budget cycle when we were trying to put this thing together. So we focused hard on the next 2 years to kind of see where we're at. With the arrival of Mr. Finelli, we've got back into this mode now. So we do have a pretty solid, I think, 5-year plan, which we do present annually with the board, which is a bylaw requirement. So that happens. But when it comes to the overall master plan, that's where we were going to kind of see, as far as facility inventory, the amount of use these facilities are getting. We're trying to assemble all of that data to put a decent master plan together as far as where are we headed. COVID-19 kind of rocked that boat a little bit. So as far as bringing consultants on to do interviews with 104 clubs to assess all the numbers that we've got, compiling all that data, we called a timeout. So we're going to reload come January. We're going to see what the economy's like at that particular point in time. So the spending on that master plan has been deferred, as well as $108 million worth of other projects as well. So come January, we'll have a little better idea as far as where we're going. So, based on where we are in the world today, with a little upended market, we're calling a bit of a timeout on that and using what data we currently have. Because leading up to the master plan over the last year, we've been collecting a lot of data in-house to kind of work with the consultants. So we have the opportunity to do some things internally, and we're proceeding with that. And that'll help us get through this budget season. But again, we'll kind of bring this thing back to life, I think, in the year 2021 and move forward.
Do we want to call it master plan instead of 5-year plan?
I would. I mean, the 5-year plan really is more of a financial picture. But as far as a master plan goes for a community, those are pretty industry standard.
Doesn't this specifically address finances, though? When you read it, it talks about, the master plan would be something different than the budget, the 5-year budget that you put together.
So, yeah, I don't expect every one of you to remember what we present at the governing board, but what you do see is part of the first part of that sentence is board-approved projects. And the focus for the approval is that year only. The 5-year financial incorporating expectations for expense changes and revenue changes, we apply some general principles unless we're aware of something tangible, and that is presented. But for non-approved R&R or some expectation of new capital that at this juncture, especially part of the master plan, we're not putting hardly any of those in there. I don't recall but 1 or 2. The R&R for the next 4 years is part of that presentation as well. So I would probably encourage you to stick with the 5-year plan statement and as the financials, and the annual budget. So I think, as Russ said, I think it accomplishes what the intent was.
Any objections?
I have no objection. I did want to note for Nancy, Bill and his team very much understand the importance of a community master plan and are working diligently towards that end. They got delayed for reasons unrelated to, that they could not control, but they're very much on board, and it's something that the community can look forward to as soon as it is feasible.
I have a question. Bill, on your master plan, is that for a set period of time? Is it a 10-year plan, 50-year plan? We know it's not a financial plan, but the thing is, in planning in the future, how far in the future are you looking?
Realistically, 5, but what the planning and the architects and the consultants will probably bring forward is a 20. But the reality is, we focus on 5.
So my only other issue is FA1 Addendum A. It looks like something Rube Goldberg put out. I just had a couple questions. Except for the pool,
I don't have that
I
document
don't,
from
oh, it should be attached there.
That's not a link.
Yeah.
It's just an image on the PDF.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah, my only question was on the process, it says there's a project planning committee is formed? And who's included in that?
It would depend on what the project is involving. So again, I'll refer to the pool. There was properties members, there were users that were frequent users of the Johnson Pool, noodlers, swimmers, everybody had input on that. And then when we presented it, everybody had input on the presentation, whether you used the facility or not.
And then when it says committee review down on the second line, is that same committee? Project planning committee?
Yeah, I'm sure it would be that committee and every other committee that would be involved in a project of that size.
Except for the pool, I don't know when we've ever had community review on a project.
So we did the beautification changes out here at Johnson when we eliminated, changed the sidewalks, removed the curbs, all the planting. I'm trying to remember everything that was affected there. The pergola entryway, that was probably our very first one.
Oh, okay.
They had the A-frames, the easels set up at the library so everybody could see. They did at least two presentations, one in the lecture hall and then one in the social hall that I remember. So two by, right off the bat that I remember. I don't think there's been more.
Yeah, well, that was my only question on that one. So right now, it looks like our only change is on 2.1, that we would clarify that it means owner members. So I'll make that motion. Do we have a second? Second. Jerry, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Passes. Like I said, we're going to push off FAO2 and combine it with FA12 at the next meeting. FAO3, indemnification of the association. I think that's pretty straightforward. Any questions? And this usually refers to like the bands and the caterers that use our facilities through events. Okay. So we'll accept that as written.
Can I just ask for clarification on the last paragraph? Bill, isn't that more requirements established by the general manager, not by the board? I just don't know. It just seemed like it would be something that you and your team would come up with.
I mean, it's what we do. It's just a matter of changing that text if you see, but from an operational policy wise, it's in policy. We carry it out procedurally. So
Okay.
I'm fine with it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So we'll accept this one as written.
Yep. Yes.
All right. FAO4 is safety awareness. I see that it's pretty straightforward. I did have one question. Are clubs required to submit a safety plan, especially those with equipment? You know, like saws and other things?
I didn't think they had a safety plan. They have a safety officer.
Jim Hager is our safety officer, and he does, oh, I'm sorry. Then I don't have.
I'll ask Director Maloney, do you know if the clubs are supposed to submit a safety plan for any of their equipment? Okay.
I think we're required, clubs are required to have a safety officer.
Right.
And that's part of the revision, bylaw revision, that you have to have a clearly dedicated safety officer and a
Right.
safety committee within your club.
Right.
And
Well, I
I do
was
know
just
that the
curious.
bicycle club has a safety plan. They actually have a, like, 3 or 4 page manual on safety. But that has to do with bike rules and different things like that. But
But it's not a requirement like for all the clubs.
I don't believe that it is.
All right, so shall we accept this one as written?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, accepted. All right. Development. Does anybody have any suggestions for the committee's goals?
Do what the policies say.
That would probably be a very good goal. My only goal, I guess, is, I'm not sure, is that there seems to be some, especially finding out this week with some of the issues, is that seems to be a lack of clarity and ambiguity in some of the policies, and that maybe our goal would be that where we find that we try and rectify it, or at least make a recommendation to the board as to where changes might be included. But I don't know if we want to set that really as a goal, but that was. So if no one has any specific goals to list, then we'll pass it off to the next meeting.
Well, I think our goals are in 1.53, taking a tour of all the facilities annually and everything that's written there to come up with a list of items that we see needed. I think another goal is just to be aware when owner members bring us issues that they find in a facility, that we bring those forward to the committee. And then the other goal is in 1.54, that when things that are brought to us from clubs or other sources, that we then look at those and come up with a recommendation to the board. So I think, your policies kind of set out your goals. And I think that's what we've done in the past as Properties Committee. And I think it's been effective, and I think it's been helpful.
Any discussion on that? Then we'll accept what's in 1.54 and what was the other one?
1.53 and 1.54.
As our goals for the year. Thank you.
Roberta, I would like to add something.
Sure.
So what this committee is, you go out through the year, you're going to have residents come up to you, they recognize who you are. I would just ask that if urgent matters like safety items are brought to you, please do not hesitate to forward them directly to us. You want to discuss them at the next meeting, go right ahead. But to save them and pocket them until the next meeting, just understand that where the flow of information needs to go. So that way we can jump on these things as quickly as possible.
Well, one thing I did want to ask you, I thought at one time somebody said that if you saw something, needed fixing, that there was a form online, but I believe the president said that it's just the member comment form?
It is.
Okay.
But you guys are the Properties Committee. You all have my email. I do not have a problem sending them directly to me. It cuts out all the red tape.
Before we move on to the next part of our agenda, the Don Baker Memorial. Like I said, this was brought up too late, oh wait, excuse me, before we move on to that, I've been reminded that on the changes we have made to the FA policy, does the committee today reach consensus to recommend to the board all FA policy changes for discussion at its 10-9 workshop? I would say we would say yes to that, except for FA 2 and 12.
Yeah.
Everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Thank you. Okay. Now moving on. My summary. Okay. I've passed out to all the committee members a recap on where we are on this issue. That we did have the meeting on the 18th of September under FAO2. And during that meeting, the general manager felt that this more falls under FA12. So there is a meeting scheduled on this issue under FA12 on October 9th in the afternoon. And whatever comes out of that meeting will then be brought to the November properties meeting to then go to the workshop in November. So pretty tight schedule. So we will just, whatever comes out of this meeting will affect our discussion on FAO2 and FA12. So if there aren't any questions, we'll move on to the next issue on the agenda. And I believe we are at update on facilities maintenance. Carl. Or Russ, whoever's going first.
Thank you, Roberta. Capital Projects Update, October 1st meeting. R.H. Johnson, the R.H. Johnson Large Dog Park renovation project. We are currently installing light poles and fixtures, final masonry, irrigation, and the final grading is in progress. sod is tentatively scheduled for next week, the week of October 9th, and I anticipate wrapping up this project for October 30th. At Kuntz, the Kuntz Master Projects, parking lot phase, asphalt is complete. We are finalizing concrete approaches at the wood shop, some of the center walkways, and the landscaping, and preparing for the county final inspection within the next week and a half. The fitness weaving and quilters addition, the building is complete. We are finalizing interior rooms, flooring, a little bit of millwork, doors, glass, and mechanical trim also in preparation for the county final inspection in another week and a half. The storage room addition, that building is also complete. We are just simply finalizing in exterior landscape, and that is ready for county final inspection. The courtyard improvements are currently in progress, painting, landscaping, control joint caulking for some of the nice paver and tile features that we have. We are working with the vendors for heater controls to have the best usable processes for turning on and turning off and controlling those heat units. And the lighting is actually completed over the open space. The Kuntz Swim and Fitness locker room showers, the shower tile project is complete, and we are simply, staff is cleaning and painting locker rooms, and it is also ready for county final inspection. Moving on to Beardsley, We have the Beardsley Arts and Crafts parking lot that was completed on September 18th for seal and stripe. At Grandview, same process. The Pro Shop parking lot was sealed and striped and completed on September 25th. At Pebblebrook, we had a very successful asphalt mill and replacement where we actually took out all of the old asphalt and replaced it with brand new. It was completed on September 24th. And then finally, capital projects upcoming. We have the Kuntz patio and pool deck resurface beginning today for the grinding process, and next Monday we'll actually start the process of applying the new rubber flooring. This project will take approximately 3 weeks and fall within our anticipated end of October finish of all projects there at Kuntz. Beginning this Saturday, we'll be doing the parking lots and walking track asphalt seal and stripe. This project was slated for a 1-week project, based on a little bit of finishing trade work for the actual additions. I'm holding off on the north parking lot until October 24th, and I will have the vendor come back and seal and stripe that at a separate date. And then finally, this upcoming Monday, the October 5th, when the library is closed, we will be replacing the library countertops throughout the main entry and DVD rental areas, the main monitor station desk, and book check-in areas. So that finalizes my report. I will tell you that Kuntz is looking fantastic. I've done multiple tours with the club presidents as they're preparing to hand me their personal items like TVs and wall hangings, punch boards, things for their crafts that facilities maintenance team will be hanging for them. They are very happy. Anybody that's had an opportunity to just kind of stroll through, because some of the craft room areas are open over there, nothing but great comments. So I believe I saw Marshall over there the other day. I didn't know what your thoughts on that, Marshall.
Well, they've done a beautiful job. I haven't missed a day going down to look, but I assure you I've looked from outside the fence.
Thank you, Marshall.
Yeah, I had instructions on that early. And I really like that superintendent. Yeah, they do a great job, and you've done a great job. It's beautiful. You should be proud. Yeah.
Checks in the mail.
Okay, so from the facilities maintenance end, we replaced HVAC unit in Diva's room at the theater. These were all in-house replacements. Coming October 10th and 11th, all 9 units at the wood shop will be replaced in-house. The first time we're doing a full weekend of replacements. Over at Beardsley, the Arts and Crafts building, we replaced HVAC unit for the office area. And we also reopened the aquatics building. Not a big crowd, but the ones that are showing are very happy that they have their place back. That's all I have.
Russ, you want to talk about the employee shuffle with John's departure?
Oh, so, yeah, over at Palm Ridge, John D. has been with us for 20 years, has retired. His last day was yesterday. We have replaced him with Jack Stroop, who actually used to work for me in facilities maintenance, hired over to golf to be the supervisor for the cleaning crew over there, and has done a fantastic job. And now I'm getting him back as John's replacement. He will be over Kuntz and R.H. Johnson. David, who used to be over at R.H. Johnson, we're moving him to Palm Ridge. Since Palm Ridge and Beardsley hold all of the events that we have, David will be handling all those events.
Carl, are you prepared to tell us anything about did we come in budget, under budget, over budget for Kuntz?
A light level conversation. I'm happy to say that from day one, because of our choices using the CMAR vendor and going through, there's 2 stages when you go through the interview process for having a CMAR opportunity. And the CMAR vendor provides you a range of magnitude. And based on the numbers that we put together from architects and created a budget, our ROM come in approximately $125,000 under budget from day one. So we got the job accomplished for that. Then, within the project itself, there's a small vendor contingency, and I think that value was based at $50,000, so the vendor has the opportunity to use funds in case, like, you open up a wall and find out there's something there was unavoidable and needed costs associated to fix. I believe we've only spent probably 50% of that. And then, as far as my management of the project in coordination with their superintendent, I've seen changes in the scope of work that has also created savings. However, those savings, we have traded in dollars and done also some changes that have made costs. So we added a sidewalk alongside of the pool on the north side between the craft rooms and the new parking lot, because I saw from a member perspective that people will cut through landscaping and get injured, and the funds were available, so we put a safety feature of an additional sidewalk in. So some things we traded, but we are definitely under budget, and Pete will be able to clarify that more in the upcoming months as we finalize billing.
Thank you. So moving on to our tour schedule. Russ, you want to go through that?
So, as of October 16th, Tuesday, 7 a.m., we'll be meeting at the Palm Ridge Aquatics Pool Entrance to do the Palm Ridge facility. Then October 8th, which is a Thursday, 7 a.m., we'll do Beardsley Tour, again, meeting at the entrance to the Aquatics Pool Building. October 13th, Tuesday, 7 a.m., we'll do the Kuntz Tour, again, meeting at the pool entrance. October 15th, Thursday, 7 a.m., we will do Metal Club and Ag Club, meeting at the metal shop. October 20th, Tuesday, 7 a.m., we'll do R.H. Johnson's Section 1, which will be meeting at the entrance to the Aquatic Center there. And then we'll finish up on the 27th, Tuesday at 7 a.m. on Section 2 of Johnson, which will meet at the social hall right outside.
And I stress everybody, please be on time. We like to get through quickly and don't want to have to wait for anybody.
So one of the things I want to cover ahead of time, and those of you that have done this knows what we have ahead of ourselves. When the folks start seeing us meandering around, they all want to know what we're doing. And it's real easy to get caught up in the sidebar communications. However, the tour moves on. So I would suggest you try to keep those short and sweet. Stay within, the quicker we move through this, the better we'll be in the long run.
Thank you.
And for anybody that's not done a tour before, I also bring, no donuts.
And comfortable shoes.
I bring the pertinent information for that facility that we're walking today for the reserve study tool. So you'll have an understanding, too, of suggested upcoming repair and replacement items so that we're basically not looking at it twice. That way, I'll tell you straight up that we're coming into this room and this room is up for a flooring replacement. You'll know that knowledge on that day of that area, so.
Thank you. Yeah, I am pointing out as part of Russ's report, I was one of those people Monday at 6 a.m. at the Beardsley pool. Until the sun comes up, you feel like it's a tomb. So I would appreciate if lighting could be enhanced in there.
I'll put in the budget a large saw so I can cut a hole in the roof to allow light in there. Del Webb didn't do us any favors when they built Beardsley, did they?
No. But as the weather gets cooler, believe me, more of us will be back over there. One of the questions I think we ought to bring up on the tours, when I was on properties in 2017, we did all the golf courses, and I saw more golf course restrooms than I ever want to see in my life. And I understand, because I asked Bob Canaro, who's chair of the golf committee, but he was just getting his feet wet with the committee, whether all of that will be handed over to the golf committee, all the facilities. Because there's nothing formal that says that.
Right. I think 2 years ago, they decided golf would do theirs, and then properties would focus on their recreation centers.
Okay.
I'm assuming they're going to do pro shops as well. I would imagine. And so 2 years ago, most of the pro shops had all been done, so there was nothing to look at. Everything's fairly new and updated, so, and that, I believe, includes the restrooms on the courses as well.
So do we have any committee member comments? Bob?
I'd like to give an update. People at the last meeting asked about the islands on R.H. Johnson and Meeker. Those islands are owned by the county. And as a matter of fact, this week, they were supposed to start putting in the vegetation in the two sections. Both sections would be, a section is usually from 4 islands to 5 islands, depending on how big they are. At both ends on R.H. Johnson, there's on the Bell end and the Grand end. And it's been put on hold because of the heat, and predominantly because 30% of the vegetation that we wanted to get from Moon's Nursery, they have not ordered because they don't want to bring it in on this hot weather. And so at this point, we don't know when Moon's is going to get the vegetation. And as soon as they do, again, we're going to have to get back on the county schedule, and they should start putting it in. The plans are that, in other words, it's probably going to take this year and next year till probably around April for them to do all the islands, to get them all done. But that's where it is at this point.
Thank you. Jerry? No comment? Barbara? Nancy?
No.
Marcia?
I'd like to ask a totally unrelated question to Bill, not personal. This 50 house unit by Fry's, I have a person that would be very interested in getting their name on the line to get on the list of wanting to buy. Is there a website that they can go to, or?
I could get that information to you. Carl was out there meeting with project manager a month or so ago. Update?
I drove through it this morning, in fact, and their off-site walls appear to be complete. It's actually thrown me a little bit for a loop on how they designed it, so they are still a ways from even having it graded to build a model home. So my suggestion to your friend would be to simply reach out to K. Hovnian Homes and just ask for their sales department. Those homes, I would imagine, if would probably be available for sale or starting sales somewhere in the end of first quarter of '21. That's my guesstimate. But if there's a list, I'm certain of it, so.
Yeah, they've got this spring circled, I know, for model homes as far as February, March is their.
I knew the original intention was February 1, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
And Katie just looked on their webpage and whatnot, and the Sun City West subdivision is not listed yet. So we'll reach out to them. I can get you that information.
Thank you.
Well, they can't start selling homes till they have their commissioner's report, and that hasn't been filed yet.
Right.
So, right. No comment? John? Sherry?
Nothing.
All right.
None, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. If we have no further business, we will see everybody on October, no, this is October. It's November 5th.
October 6th for our first tour.
Oh, the tour, that's correct. Thank you. We're adjourned.